Ambassador Lee wiped the sweat from his palms as he walked into the massive council chamber. The room was so big that his footsteps echoed like thunder. Hundreds of alien beings sat in floating seats that rose up like a mountain around him. Their eyes, tentacles, and other strange body parts all turned to watch him. He had been Earth's voice to the galaxy for 15 years. In all that time, they had never really listened to him. Today was different. Today, millions of lives hung in the balance. The hologram projector hummed to life behind him. A three-dimensional image of the Xerion star system appeared, showing 4 beautiful worlds spinning around their golden sun. But Lee could see what the aliens could not. The sun was dying. Members of the Galactic Council, Lee began, his voice shaking slightly. I bring urgent news from Earth's scientists. The star in the Xerion system will explode in exactly 72 hours. A ripple of what sounded like laughter moved through the chamber. Counselor Vextar, a creature that looked like a giant purple spider, clicked his mandibles in amusement. Little human, your species has only been traveling between stars for 300 years. We have studied the cosmos for thousands of years before your world even had fire. Dr. Kim stepped up beside Lee. Her face was pale and tired from days, without sleep. She had spent weeks checking and rechecking the terrible data. Counselor Vexitar, our quantum computers can detect things your older methods cannot see. The star's core is already collapsing. The gravitational waves are getting stronger every hour. Impossible, said Counselor Thex, whose blue tentacles waved dismissively. Xerion Prime is a stable star. It has at least 10,000 years of life left. We have measured it many times. Lee felt his heart sink. He had expected this reaction, but it still hurt. Please just listen to our data. Look at these readings. The hologram changed to show complex wave patterns and energy signatures. To Lee, they looked like the heartbeat of a dying giant, but the council members barely glanced at them. Primitive human superstition, Thex continued. You show us meaningless squiggles and expect us to panic. 13 billion beings live peacefully in the Xerion system. We will not frighten them with your wild theories. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her voice growing desperate. The quantum fluctuations in the stellar core are creating a cascade failure. When it reaches critical mass, the entire star will collapse and then explode outward. Every planet in that system will be destroyed in minutes. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Counselor Zekthor, the galaxy's most famous star scientist, stood up slowly. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke. Humans think they understand stars better than species who mapped the galaxy while they were still living in caves. This is the desperate cry of a small world trying to seem important. Lee felt anger burning in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. We're not trying to seem important. We're trying to save lives. If we're wrong, you can laugh at us forever. But if we're right and you do nothing, 13 billion people will die. The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Lee thought, maybe, just maybe, he was getting through to them. Then Vextar spoke again. The Xerion system has been stable for millions of years. Their star is healthy and strong. We will not create panic based on the hysterical warnings of a species that barely understands space travel. At least let us put rescue ships near the system, Lee pleaded. If nothing happens, we'll leave quietly. But if the star does explode, we can save some people. The council voted quickly. Every single member voted against Earth's request. The warning was officially dismissed as human nonsense. As the session ended, Lee walked slowly from the chamber. Dr. Kim walked beside him, her eyes filled with tears. Through the space station's huge window, they could see the distant glow of the Xerion system. It looked so peaceful and beautiful from here. How much time do we really have? Lee asked quietly. Kim looked at her tablet. 68 hours and 17 minutes. The core collapse started 3 hours ago. Nothing can stop it now. Lee pressed a button on his emergency communicator. His voice was steady despite the weight of what he was about to do. This is Ambassador Lee calling Earth Command. Use authorization code Omega-7. Begin Operation Lifeline immediately. On the other end of the transmission, Admiral Park's voice crackled back. "Sir, the Council will be furious if we send ships without permission. 13 billion people are about to die, Admiral. I don't care if the Council gets angry." Lee looked back at the chamber where the alien leaders were already moving on to other business. "Gather every rescue ship we have. We're going to save who we can, with or without their blessing." As Lee and Kim walked toward their shuttle, the Xerian sun continued its death spiral 60 light-years away. The people living on those 4 worlds had no idea their star was already dying. They went about their normal lives, trusting their leaders to keep them safe. But their leaders had chosen pride over wisdom. And in less than 3 days, that choice would cost 13 billion lives. Captain Park stood on the bridge of her ship, the Mercy, watching the stars stretch into lines as 18 Earth vessels jumped into hyperspace. Every rescue ship humanity could spare was racing toward the Xerian system. It felt like trying to empty an ocean with a teacup. "Captain," Lieutenant Song called from his station, "the Galactic Council is sending angry messages. They want us to turn back immediately." Park's jaw tightened. "Tell them we're doing training exercises in deep space. Nothing more." The lie tasted bitter, but she had her orders. Earth Command had been clear. Save who they could, but don't start a war with the Council. Park looked at the star charts on her screen. 18 ships to evacuate 13 billion people. The math was horrible. Meanwhile, on Azerion Prime, Governor Nalthub appeared on every screen across the planet. His snake-like body coiled confidently as he addressed his people. "My fellow citizens, ignore the panic from the human ships heading our way. They are simply trying to make themselves look important to the galaxy. Our star is perfectly safe." In Nerteon, the great city of New Thessia, 8 million people went about their normal day. Children flew their hover bikes through the floating parks while their parents worked in the crystal towers that reached toward the sky. The twin suns above looked the same as always, casting their warm golden light across the world. Nobody noticed that the light was getting slightly brighter each hour. Back on Earth, Professor Yang sat in his laboratory at Seoul University, staring at data that made his hands shake. The stellar readings from Xerion were getting worse by the minute. Solar flares were increasing. The star's magnetic field was becoming chaotic. He activated his emergency broadcast to anyone in the galaxy who would listen. "The stellar core is falling apart," he said, pointing at the frightening patterns on his screens. "The star's outer layers are starting to heat up. Xerion Prime will explode, and it will happen very soon." But across the galaxy, major news networks buried his warnings in their back pages. The story was treated like a curiosity. Human scientists claim star will explode, not the urgent disaster warning it actually was. The famous Galactic Council scientist Zekthor appeared on primetime news shows, his 4 arms waving dismissively. "These humans," he said with obvious disgust, "think they know more about stars than species who have studied them for thousands of years." It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. The news anchor, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, nodded agreement. "So you're saying there's no danger to the Xerion system?" "None whatsoever," Zekthor replied confidently. "Xerion Prime is a stable, healthy star. It will burn steadily for another 10,000 years at least. Captain Park received updates from Earth as her fleet got closer to Xerion space. The news was all bad." Dr. Kim's voice came through the long-range radio, tired and worried. "The star's behavior is getting more violent every hour. Massive energy bursts every few minutes now. We're seeing gravitational waves that shouldn't exist if the star was stable." "How long do we have?" Park asked. 57 hours from now, the star will explode. The point where we could have stopped it past 6 hours ago. Those people are living on borrowed time." Park closed her eyes and tried not to think about the numbers. 13 billion people. Her 18 ships could carry maybe 3 million. If they packed them in like cargo, that meant over 12 billion would die no matter what she did. On Xerion Secondary, the farming world that fed the entire system, Administrator Plex was starting to worry. His instruments were picking up strange readings from their sun. Solar radiation was increasing. The carefully controlled weather systems were beginning to act strangely. He called Governor Nal Thuv on Zerion Prime. "Governor, I'm seeing some unusual stellar activity. Maybe we should at least prepare some evacuation ships just in case the humans are right." Nal Thuv's image flickered with annoyance. "Administrator Plex, I will not have panic in this system based on human lies. Their so-called rescue fleet is nothing but a publicity stunt. Do not mention evacuation again." The call ended, leaving Plex staring at his instruments. The radiation levels were definitely rising. In the agricultural domes around him, the automated systems were working harder to filter out the increasing solar energy. Captain Park's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zerion space 55 hours before the predicted explosion. Through the bridge windows, she could see the system's star in the distance. Even from billions of miles away, it looked wrong. The light seemed to pulse and flicker instead of burning steadily. "All ships, this is Captain Park," she broadcast to her small fleet. "We have less than 3 days to save as many people as possible. Every second counts now. Begin approach to Zerion Prime immediately." Her communications officer looked up from his station. "Captain, we're getting transmissions from Zerion Prime's government. They're ordering us to leave their space immediately." Park looked at the distant, dying star and thought about the billions of people who didn't know they were about to die. "Ignore them, Lieutenant. We have work to do." The race against time had begun. The first solar flare erupted from Zerion Prime just as Captain Park's rescue fleet arrived at the edge of the star system. The massive burst of energy painted the sky in brilliant colors, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Park watched from her bridge as the star that had warmed 4 worlds for millions of years began its final, violent death. "All ships, this is Captain Park," she announced to her 17 other vessels. "We have maybe 40 hours before the star explodes completely. Save the children and old people first. Emergency rules are now in effect." On Zerion Prime's surface, the people could no longer ignore what was happening above them. The planet's protective magnetic field started to flicker as deadly radiation poured down from their dying sun. Strange colored lights danced across the daytime sky, and the communication satellites that connected their world began failing one by one. Governor Nal Thuv finally appeared on the emergency broadcast network, his confident manner now replaced by barely controlled panic. "Citizens of Zerion Prime," he said, his voice shaking. We may have been wrong about the human warnings. All spacecraft are now being used for evacuation. Please remain calm and follow emergency procedures." But it was far too late for calm evacuation. The big colony ships that could carry millions of people were in distant star systems or broken down in repair docks. Only small passenger ships and cargo haulers remained, vessels that could carry thousands, not billions. Dr. Shin set up the emergency medical center in Zerion Prime's main spaceport. She had trained as a doctor, but nothing had prepared her for this nightmare. Millions of panicked people crowded the landing platforms, fighting to get aboard the human rescue ships. "Captain Park," she radioed to the Mercy, "if we push every ship beyond safe limits, we might save 3 million people. But there are over 8 billion on this world alone." The numbers were horrible, but Park kept working. Her crew loaded evacuees as fast as they could while Zerion Prime's star continued dying above them. Each passing hour brought more violent solar storms, and the planet's weather began turning deadly. Massive hurricanes formed out of nowhere, as the energy that had kept the climate stable for thousands of years collapsed. On Zerion Secondary, the smaller farming world, Administrator Plex made the hardest choice of his life. "Shut down the weather control systems," he ordered his staff. "Put all power into the evacuation platforms. If we're all going to die anyway, at least let some people escape." The farming domes that fed the entire star system went dark, as every bit of energy was redirected to the rescue effort. Crops that had taken months to grow withered and died, but it didn't matter anymore. In 2 days, there would be no one left to eat them. Captain Park stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display as her 18 ships worked frantically to save who they could. Her second-in-command, Commander Choi, reported the terrible mathematics. "At our current speed, We'll evacuate 2.8 million people before the star goes critical. Total system population is 13.4 billion. Through the bridge windows, Park could see Xerion Prime beginning to pulse visibly. The star's light changed from normal yellow to angry red to brilliant white in irregular, frightening patterns. Everyone in the star system could see their sun dying now. Dr. Kim's voice crackled over the long-distance radio from Earth. Captain, the stellar collapse will begin in approximately 18 hours. The explosion's shockwave will reach Xerion Prime 7 minutes after it starts. You need to be at safe distance in 15 hours. Park looked at the endless lines of refugees still waiting to board the rescue ships. 15 hours to save as many as possible, then abandon billions to save millions. The choice made her sick, but it was the only choice she had. All ships, pack them in tighter, she ordered. Emergency capacity on every vessel. We stay until the last possible second. The human ships worked through the night as Xerion Prime's star grew more violent. Solar flares erupted every few minutes now, each one larger than the last. The planet's protective atmosphere began to glow as radiation poured through it. In the capital city of New Thessia, families said goodbye as they waited in the massive evacuation lines. Parents lifted children toward the human ships, hoping strangers would save their little ones even if they themselves couldn't escape. Zekthor, the alien scientist who had mocked Earth's warnings, now stood on his own world 3 star systems away, watching the disaster unfold through his telescopes. His 4 hands shook as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The humans had been right all along. Commander Choi's voice was tight with stress as he announced the final countdown. All ships, we have reached the deadline. Begin departure procedures immediately. Captain Park stood frozen, watching thousands of people still waiting on the platforms below. The star above them was pulsing like a giant heart in its final moments. Captain, Choi asked quietly. We have to go now, or we'll all die with them. Park closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 12 billion lives she couldn't save. All ships jump to hyperspace. Emergency departure. Now. The human fleet vanished just as Xerion Prime entered its final moments. Behind them, a star prepared to die, taking with it everything that had ever lived in its light. Commander Choi's voice echoed through every ship in the human rescue fleet. All vessels, this is Fleet Command. We are now at minimum safe distance. Begin immediate departure procedures. Captain Park stood frozen on the bridge of the Mercy, staring through the giant windows at Xerion Prime. Thousands of people still crowded the evacuation platforms on the planet's surface, their faces turned upward toward the rescue ships that were about to abandon them. Above them all, their star pulsed like a dying animal, its light shifting from gold to deep red to blinding white. Captain, Dr. Shin's voice came from the refugee areas below, thick with emotion. We have 3.2 million souls aboard our fleet, but there are still... Her voice broke completely. There are still so many left behind. On the main viewing screen, Xerion Prime filled the entire display. The planet's surface already showed signs of the stellar chaos happening above. Massive storms raged across whole continents, and the strange green aurora lights had become a constant ghostly curtain across the sky. Cities that had stood for thousands of years watched their sun prepare to murder them. Fleet departure in 30 minutes, Choi announced, his voice steady despite everything. The mathematics were simple and terrible. They needed exactly that much time to reach minimum safe distance before the supernova's deadly light and radiation caught up with them. Ambassador Lee watched from the Galactic Council space station, monitoring the long-range sensors as the human fleet prepared to jump away. Around him, the council members who had dismissed Earth's warnings now sat in complete silence. Their mistake was about to play out in front of the entire galaxy. Doctor. Kim's voice transmitted the final countdown from Earth, her words carrying across the light years. Stellar collapse beginning in 17 minutes. The star's outer layers are starting to explode outward. This is really happening now. On Xerion Prime's surface, Governor Nalthov made his final broadcast to the galaxy. His snake-like body was perfectly still, despite the chaos visible through the windows behind him. Lightning storms raged across the sky, and the ground shook with earthquakes as their world's core responded to the stellar violence above. To the humans who tried to save us, he said calmly, Thank you for caring when our own leaders did not. To the Galactic Council who condemned us to death, learn from our fate. Tell the galaxy that Xerion died not from stellar physics, but from pride and stupidity. Captain Park gave the order she had been dreading since this mission began. All ships jump to hyperspace immediately. Emergency departure execute now. The human rescue fleet disappeared from normal space, carrying their 3.2 million refugees to safety. Behind them, Xerion Prime's core reached the point of no return. For one impossible moment, the star hung perfectly balanced between life and death. The nuclear fires that had burned for billions of years finally lost their battle against gravity. The core collapsed in on itself, becoming denser than anything in nature should allow. Then it exploded. The supernova lit up half the galaxy. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from 1,000 light-years away, outshining entire clusters of normal stars. Xerion Prime, Xerion Secondary, and the two smaller mining worlds simply ceased to exist in the first microsecond. The matter that had once been planets was scattered across space as superheated gas. The 4 orbital cities and 17 space stations vanished so quickly that their inhabitants never knew what hit them. 13.1 billion beings who had lived and loved and hoped under Xerion's gentle light were reduced to atoms in an instant. The explosion's shock wave raced outward at nearly the speed of light itself, carrying the scattered remains of an entire civilization. Where moments before there had been worlds and cities and families, now there was only expanding fire and radiation. In hyperspace, the human rescue fleet felt the gravitational waves from the explosion ripple through dimensions. The ship shuddered as space itself bent and twisted around them. Captain Park closed her eyes and whispered a prayer for the dead, while behind her, 3.2 million survivors wept for their lost homes and families. The Galactic Council's space station recorded everything with scientific precision. Their instruments measured the energy output, the radiation patterns, the exact timing of the stellar collapse. But no machine could measure the weight of silence that fell over the council chambers, as they truly understood what their arrogance had cost. Counselor Vexitar sat motionless, his 6 eyes staring at the sensor readings that confirmed humanity's predictions had been perfect down to the minute. Counselor Thex's blue tentacles hung limp with shame. They had been offered the chance to save 13 billion lives, and they had chosen pride instead. The explosion continued expanding, a sphere of death growing larger every second. In a few hours, it would sterilize every world within 10 light-years. In a few days, the radiation would reach civilizations hundreds of light-years away, announcing to the galaxy that Xerion was gone forever. On distant worlds, people would look up at their night skies and see a new star burning brighter than anything else in the heavens. For a few months, Xerion's death would be the brightest thing in their sky. Then it would fade, leaving only darkness where a star system used to be. Xerion was gone. 13 billion people were dead. And it was all because the galaxy's leaders had been too proud to listen to a warning from Earth. The greatest tragedy in galactic history was complete. 6 months after the Xerion disaster, Ambassador Lee walked into the Galactic Council chamber, once again. But everything had changed. The huge room felt different now, heavy with shame and regret. Empty seats marked where representatives from the destroyed worlds used to sit. The remaining council members looked older, worn down by the weight of their terrible mistake. "Honored Council," Lee began, his voice carrying the memory of 13 billion ghosts. "Earth presents the Xerion prevention protocols for your consideration." Counselor Vextar, his 6 eyes now dull with grief, leaned forward slowly. "Ambassador Lee, before we discuss anything else, this council must formally acknowledge our catastrophic failure. We killed those worlds. We killed them because we refused to listen to your warnings." The chamber fell completely silent. In all of galactic history, the council had never apologized to anyone, especially not to a species they considered primitive. Dr. Kim stepped forward beside Lee. The month since, Xerion had aged her terribly. Her hair was now completely gray and deep lines marked her face. The question everyone has asked is simple. Why did Earth's scientists see what your experts missed? The answer will surprise you. She pressed a button, and a hologram of Earth's sun appeared above them, showing its internal structure in glowing detail. Our star is dying, not tomorrow or next century, but in about 4 billion years our sun will expand into a red giant and burn our world to nothing. Shocked whispers echoed through the chamber. Many council members had never known this basic fact about Earth's situation. We have lived our entire history knowing our star will kill us someday, Kim continued. Every human child learns about stellar death in school. We study dying stars not because we find them interesting, but because we need to understand how our own sun will kill us. The hologram changed to show the difference between galactic science methods and Earth's quantum analysis. When you spend thousands of years preparing for your star's death, you develop very specific skills. We see the signs of stellar collapse because we have been watching for them in our own sun since we first looked up at the sky. Admiral Park, promoted after her heroic rescue mission, addressed the military side of the disaster. Our rescue ships existed because we have always known that someday we will need to evacuate Earth. Every human learns evacuation procedures as a child. It is part of who we are as a people. She paused, looking around the chamber at the alien. Faces marked by shame. We tried to save Xerion because we know exactly what it feels like to live under a star that will someday kill you. We could not stand by and watch it happen to others. One of the Xerion survivors, a young engineer named Velkol, who had been among the last evacuated, stood to speak. His voice shook with emotion. My parents, my brothers, my wife, they all died because this council was too proud to listen to warnings from Earth. My entire world burned because you thought humans were too stupid to understand stars. He looked directly at Counselor Thex, who had been among the most dismissive. Do not let pride kill again. Please. Counselor Thex rose slowly, his blue tentacles trembling. The Xerion prevention protocols are adopted immediately and unanimously. From this day forward, any scientific warning from any member species will be investigated at once. Regardless of how advanced or primitive we think they are, the new protocols were comprehensive. Any stellar warning would trigger immediate joint investigations. Evacuation ships would be positioned within hours, not days. Most importantly, no species would ever again be dismissed simply because others considered them backward. Ambassador Lee nodded gravely. Earth accepts the responsibility of leading the new Stellar Safety Commission. But we do this with heavy hearts. These protocols should never have been needed. 13 billion people died to teach the galaxy about listening to others. Behind the council podium, a new memorial wall displayed the names of every world lost in the Xerion explosion. At the very top, written in letters of pure gold, were the words, "They died because we would not listen." Dr. Kim looked up through the station's massive viewport at the distant stars. Somewhere among them, the light from Xerion's explosion was still traveling outward, carrying the last glow of the worlds that had died. In a few years, that light would reach civilizations that had never heard of Xerion, and they would see a new star burn bright in their sky before fading forever. But maybe those distant peoples would also learn the lesson written in that light. That wisdom can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important message. The memorial services continued for months across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, people held ceremonies for the Xerion dead. Children learned new songs about listening to warnings, no matter who gave them. And in the depths of space, Earth's scientists continued their patient watch over humanity's own dying star, knowing that someday their warnings might save not just alien worlds but their own people as well. The galaxy had learned to listen. The price had been 13 billion lives, but the lesson would never be forgotten. Never again would Earth's warnings fall on deaf ears.